Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Maintaining Company Culture Across a Distributed Workforce. My name is Jeremy Girard. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Envision Technology Advisors. I will be presenting a lot of today's topic, and I'm actually joined today by one of my colleagues, our HR representative, Edwina. Edwina, would you like to say hello?
Hello, everyone.
And you should see both of our videos on screen along with the slide deck that you're going to be looking at today. Some contact information there if after today's session you want to speak to either of us about anything that we've covered today. Feel free to reach out to us. We'll be happy to do so. Some additional housekeeping and contact information. If in general you like the content that we've provided, if you'd like more content like it, whether these are additional webinar sessions, whether it's some of the content that we're putting on our website or on our social feeds, there's some additional information that you can use to follow Envision's channels and get more information like this, and certainly be updated when we do schedule events like other webinars, or in the future when we're actually back to doing live events and we're in person again. Those will also be posted there, of course, as well. During today's session, we certainly would love to hear from you. If you have any questions, you don't have to wait until after the webinar is done to reach out to us. In GoToWebinar, they do have a feature that allows you to ask a question of us during the session. We've got a screenshot there to show you kind of what it looks like. If you just type that question in there, we'll be happy to try to get to it. It might be towards the end of the session, but we will do our best to answer that as quickly as we can. So getting to the topic at hand, and you know, this is something that we've been talking about. We've been doing a number of webinars, like most organizations, in the absence of being able to do live events, webinars, and online sessions, whether it's through GoToWebinar like we're using today, whether it's through Zoom meetings or one of the many platforms that people are using to connect remotely these days. We have been doing a lot of these sessions, and we've been really saying this across all of those different topics, that the world and the way that we all work is forever changed. Right now I'm actually in the office here at Envision today, so it's kind of a semblance of normalcy, but when I'm in my chair in my office, it feels normal until I kind of look around or listen, because I'm alone. There's nobody else here in the office. Envision's office is a place where there's usually a lot going on. There's a lot of laughter. There's a lot of people collaborating and, quite frankly, enjoying each other's company. And in our physical space right now, we're certainly not there yet. This, I don't believe, is going to be the normal forever. There will be a change where more people are getting back to the office, but I'm not expecting that it's going to go back to exactly how it was in, say, February, before the impacts of this pandemic, really started to show themselves, before our organizations really had to change the way that we work and move into this distributed workforce fashion. So that phrase, distributed workforce, it's right in the title of today's webinar. How do you maintain company culture across a distributed workforce? So before we get into that, I think that it's helpful to define what I mean by that. What is a distributed workforce? And we intentionally use those words. We don't want to say remote workforce. I've heard our CEO and founder, Todd Knapp, routinely push back against that phrase, remote work, and simply because the concept of a remote worker, remote means isolated, it means separate. And quite honestly, before COVID-19, kind of forced us into this current workforce model, that was one of the biggest complaints of remote workers, is they felt distanced from other employees. Now with everyone working outside of the physical office in most cases, we are all distributed, and that's the difference. Is a distributed workforce, it's really a combination. What we are striving for here is a workforce that can remain productive, that can do their job. They have access to the resources, the applications, the tools they need, regardless of where they are working, whether that is physically in the office, whether that is from home, or whether that is a park bench somewhere. That's what we mean by distributed workforce, and that's going to be our new normal. Our new normal is that everybody being in our office or in our offices, because certainly there are plenty of organizations that are, multi-office, where they have offices where they're, different ones throughout the state or through different states, different countries even. That certainly is going to remain. However, even in that model, you had lots of employees in set locations, as opposed to today where employees are all over. Distributed workforce is here to stay, and there's a lot of benefits to distributed workforce. It actually makes your company more resilient. It opens you up to additional hiring options. If you've only been able to draw from your small geographic region, if you suddenly can support a distributed workforce, you actually have access to a much larger talent pool. These are all benefits we've actually spoken about on some of our previous webinars, and I'm sure we'll speak about again in future webinars. But one of the challenges of distributed workforce is, how do you maintain that company culture, which is what we're going to cover today. And the first thing I think that you need to do is you need to define what your company culture is, because along the way today, I'm going to certainly give you some examples, and Edwina is going to give you some examples of what we're doing here at Envision. And with the caveat, what we are doing is not going to work for every company out there. Envision, if you've known Envision for any length of time, you know that we're certainly unique in a number of ways. We definitely like to have fun. We definitely have our own kind of brand and our own kind of culture. So some of the things that really work for us may not work exactly for your company. Hopefully what I want to do today is just show you some examples of what we're doing and why we're doing it, what our thought process is, because I think there's some lessons behind what we are trying to do that hopefully will get you thinking about how you can take your company culture and really transform it in a way that it's going to work for that distributed workforce model. Whether you have some employees in the office, some that are outside of the office, whether you have all your employees outside of the office, distributed fashion is going to be different for different companies, and it's going to be different across time. Right now here in Rhode Island, we're just entering phase one. A lot of companies are still having all of their employees work outside of the office. That is slowly going to start changing, where small percentages of employees are going to be coming back into the office. That alone is going to provide some cultural challenges, where it's going to be back to that situation where some people are, working at the office, they're really there, and then other people are still going to be at home. So how do we deal with all of that going forward? These are the different points that we're going to look at today. Reviewing your communication tools, making time for culture, incredibly important, ensuring that your people actually feel safe, establishing standards and communicating expectations, and finally being flexible. We're going to cover all of those today. So let's dive right in to communication tools, because before we can really cover any of the other ideas that we're going to look at, this is, I think, where you have to start. And Envision has been advocating, we've been talking about digital transformation, of which agile workforce or distributed workforce, those are two different kind of somewhat interchangeable phrases, but we've been advocating for that for years now. And a big part of supporting an agile workforce is ensuring that you have seamless communication and collaboration tools. Those tools are incredibly essential to support that distributed workforce, and they're actually also necessary to help maintain company culture. If your people cannot communicate with each other effectively, if they cannot collaborate with each other effectively, they're certainly not going to be very productive in their work requirements, but they're also going to have an incredibly difficult time trying to maintain any kind of connection and any type of culture. And then a critical piece of this is certainly video. It's interesting, just in talking to members of my family, my brother-in-law and my sister-in-law, we don't talk a lot about work. We a lot of different kinds of companies, and it's been interesting since this all started, where I've been asking them, genuinely curious, how is working outside of your office going for you? And certainly there are some that can't work outside of the office. My sister-in-law is a hairdresser. That's not something she can do remotely. Right now she is not able to work. On the flip side, I have other people that are in like manufacturing where they are currently working right now. They're considered essential. They are going into an office. They don't have the ability to not work. But then, like a lot of organizations, I do have plenty of people I've spoken to that are working remotely as much as possible. And when I ask them how that's going for them, how the communication and collaboration and what tools they're using, I see an incredible disparity across the board in terms of the tools they are actually using to do their jobs. And probably the biggest disparity I see is in video. I certainly have some people, like I said, Envision has been advocating this for a couple of years. So when this all happened, we were already very, very used to being able to work outside of our traditional office environment. We already had, good webcams and good connection tools that would allow us to maintain that robust collaboration, even if we couldn't all be in the physical space. That's not true across the board. So this is where I think you really, really need to begin. Now, at Envision, we've used Microsoft Teams for a number of years. This is really our hub for all of our communication and collaboration. And if you're not familiar with Microsoft Teams, this is certainly not the only solution that you could use for maintaining those elements of your business communication and collaboration. It's the one we're going to be most familiar with because it's what we've chosen, and it's certainly what we advocate for our clients. This is an example of Microsoft Teams. So you can see here, this is in Microsoft Teams. I mean, they call it that because you can create these different teams, and you add different members of the organization to the team. So I have one here called the Marketing Wolf Pack that you can see on the screen. And the Marketing Wolf Pack is, myself, the other members of the marketing division here, and our CEO, Todd. I do a lot of work very closely with Todd on our different marketing efforts. So this is where we communicate everything that has to do under that umbrella of marketing. And you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, there's a number of different categories. Those are called channels. So these are the different, to keep it organized, if we're going to be talking about our sister company, KLR, you can see that there is an actual channel there for KLR. So whenever I need to communicate something to the team that has to do with KLR, any marketing efforts we're working on with them, any communications we're having with them, I put it right under that channel. It keeps all the files that we work on together. It's incredibly organized. This is allowing us to have that robust communication and collaboration. And most importantly, it has really, really great video features. So this was a screenshot I took a couple days ago of myself and my colleague here, Meg. Meg and I work very closely on all of our marketing efforts. Meg handles a lot of our social media, and she does all of our video work. So we're on video with each other multiple times each day. And that is what is important. I have not been in the same physical space as Meg in a couple months, but I don't feel disconnected from her because I genuinely see her 5 days a week. Not one day goes by that we're not on video in some way. And not only talking about work. I mean, that's one of the things we're talking about, maintaining culture. When you're in the office and you see people, there's chit chat. You ask them how they're doing, how their weekend was. You don't tend to do that as much if you're using, like, say, email. So email is great for a lot of things, but I would suggest that it's not real wonderful for maintaining company culture. If I'm going to be sending someone an email, it's so purpose-driven. I got to get in, tell them what I need to tell them, and get out. I'm not going to actually, make a real connection. I'm not going to ask them how their weekend was and things like that. And these may seem like small things, but again, it is an important part of maintaining culture, of keeping everyone together. And this is just one-on-one. this is just me actually having a little communication with Meg. You can do a lot more with Teams. You're going to have a lot more people on video as well. Actually, right now, you're going to have a number of people actually on video in a chat, and it shows 4 different people at once. And Teams decides whose video they're going to show you based on like the last person that spoke. They bubble them up. There's going to be an upgrade coming for that very soon that they're going to increase that to 9 people on screen at once, which when you're having company communications, that's obviously going to be incredibly helpful. Video as a whole during this COVID pandemic has increased usage. So this was a slide. I actually did a marketing webinar a few weeks ago, and this was a slide that I had in there from Microsoft, obviously the creator of Teams, talking about the fact that video is getting used twice as much since the start of the outbreak. And this is, literally across the world. That doesn't surprise me. Obviously, so many of us are turning to video to make connections, to have meetings in the absence of being able to do it face-to-face. But again, we need to make sure that we have the tools to do that. So when you're thinking about maintaining company culture, the first thing that I would look at for your organization is what platform, what tools do we have in place to allow for communication and collaboration, and certainly do all of our team members spread out wherever have access to quality webcams so we can be on video, we can be face-to-face, even if we're not physically in the same place. So the second point we're going to talk about is making time for culture. And the point that I want to start with is you need to create opportunities for connections. So when you're physically in the office, there are tons of opportunities for connections that just happen organically because people are in the same physical space. If I walk to the front of the office and I want to, refill my water, I'm going to walk by a number of desks along the way. I'm going to see my colleagues. We're going to chat. When I get up there, I may see somebody else getting some water as well. We're going to ask. We're going to literally have water cooler conversation. I mean, that is obviously such a, a cheesy office kind of, trope, but it's true. You do that. I've had multiple conversations legitimately by the water cooler. Just being in the same physical space. I mean, even something as simple as holding a door for someone. Someone's coming in and, Danielle's coming in, she's, handles, our reception, and she's coming in and I open the door and, hey, how you doing today? That sense of being nice to someone, doing something for them, that is part of culture. That's how people feel connected. Well, when we're all distributed and we're not together, we don't have those opportunities that just happen because we're in the same physical space. So you need to create those opportunities. And here are a few of the ways that we've done this at Envision. The first one is just regular staff meetings. Making sure that we are regularly getting together, and this is actually a business function, regularly getting together to talk about what's happening and to be on video. We do not have any meetings here at Envision that are not on video. Now, we don't obviously require every single employee to put their video on at all times. It's up to them. And a number of people will sign on and they will, mute their audio, they will turn off their video, maybe only turn it on if they're actually going to communicate. But regular staff meetings are genuinely an opportunity for people to connect. That's more on the business side. More on the cultural side and just kind of people getting together, morning coffee. So our CEO, Todd, a couple times a week will just impromptu around 8:30 in the morning, he'll post up a Teams message, and in Teams you can send a message to, we have a team just called Envision General, so it's all of us. So he'll just post a message to Envision General saying, hey, have my morning coffee if anyone wants to join, and we'll jump on as a group for 30 minutes, and it's no shop talk. We're not talking about, oh, what's on your agenda today, or what's this client doing, how's this project going. We're just sitting there and connecting just like we would if I was walking by somebody's desk and asking them how their weekend was, asking them how they're doing. it's a simple thing, like it's such a small little thing, but I can't tell you, especially because it starts the day, I can't tell you how many times I've logged on to that morning coffee and heard my colleagues laughing. And when I get off, I feel fresher. And not just because I just had a cup of coffee, that helps too, but certainly just being around them, seeing their faces again. And it's funny, I'm saying this. We did one this morning, and my colleague Annette came on, and Annette has a number of pet ducks. And Annette on camera brought her duck, and it's a big duck, and she was showing it, and she was answering questions about the duck, and then she said, oh, I got to put the duck down, it just pooped on me. And it was funny. It was a fun moment, and it was something that we all laughed at. That moment that we all shared right there, that was culture happening. Friday happy hours, the exact opposite. Instead of morning coffee, a number of times at the end of a work week, which, I don't know about you, but my work weeks have felt incredibly, there's so much going on. There's so much we're working on. I talked about this on our marketing webinar, that it seems like we're cramming so much more into each day. Stuff like this, all these Zoom meetings that we're doing, all these webinars that we're attending, they definitely take a toll on us. I know that by the end of the day on Friday, I'm absolutely wiped. So it's nice to just do that with everybody, just kind of hang out and have, a little bit of conversation and wind down the week and go into the weekend and enjoy people's company. And one thing that I think is interesting that I've personally noticed, specifically on the Friday happy hours, is there are some team members that I've seen started joining those happy hours that normally wouldn't get super involved in a lot of our cultural activities. So I remember years ago, and he's no longer with the company, he's moved on to another organization, but I remember a great employee, loved working with him, was a big Envision advocate, but he would never come to any of our after hours type events. And I remember asking him, why don't you ever participate? Why don't we ever see you? And he, very succinctly told me that, listen, I love being here. I'll do, whatever I need to do to help this company out. But at the end of the day, when my work day is done, I want to go home to my family. That's my family time, and I value it greatly. And you can't begrudge somebody that. That is important. That's how he maintained his work-life balance. And in any organization, you're going to have other team members that are like that. They'll give everything they can while they're in the office, but when it's time to go home, they genuinely want to go home. I've noticed some of those team members at Envision that are participating more. And part of that is, very likely that they're feeling cooped up. They want some additional connection. But that's the point of what we're talking about here. By providing those outlets for connection, you're getting some of them out of the woodwork as well, because that's something they need. They want that connection. They want that culture. So think about ways that you can help provide that. Here's some of the ways we're doing it. So part of making time for culture, I would also say, is thinking about how you can transform your current culture or events that you do to work in a distributed fashion. So I said Envision likes to have fun. We have our own kind of unique culture. Here's a couple photos of some of the Envision cultural events we've done over the last few years. Again, anyone that knows Envision knows that we take Halloween very seriously, as evidenced by the picture above. That is our office at Halloween last year. Literally everyone dresses up, and we've had 100% participation in our costume contest for like 4 or 5 years running. Other pictures here, there's our Nerf gun battle that we did. Edwina, who's joining me on the screen today, a couple of years ago, she started our annual holiday prank for our CEO, Todd, and that is literally a picture of when she wrapped everything in his office, literally everything, pens, you name it. There's a picture of myself and Danielle on Fancy Friday. A lot of organizations have Dress Down Friday, and we said, you know what? We're an IT company. We're already not very formal, so let's flip that idea on its head. Let's do Fancy Friday. And we had people in suits and everything. I had that nice shiny jacket on. And then the last one here is us playing Hungry Hungry Hippos. We had a game day where all of us came in and we had a bunch of different contests using like traditional children's games like Bop It and Hungry Hungry Hippos and stuff. So what you'll notice in all of those photos is we were together as a group. And that's a challenge, because what we've realized at Envision is a lot of our culture happens when we are together. So what happens when we can't be together? And this is one of the things that we started thinking about early on. As soon as we realized that we were going to have to shift to a fully distributed fashion, we sat down, Todd called myself, called Edwina, other key members of the organization to say, what are we going to do to make sure we maintain connections? What are we going to do to make sure that some of the things that our employees really have come to love are things that we can continue to provide them even when we can't be together? So here's a little fun. We had a remote kind of scavenger hunt contest, and Edwina and Meg, who I showed earlier on my video chat, they put together this really cool scavenger hunt that we did. We created teams, and we were all on video, so we're all interacting, and we're running around our house looking for different items like a dictionary and a foreign coin. And then they started throwing in these brain teasers, and we only had a certain amount of time to not only find the brain teaser, but figure out exactly what we had to go find in our house. So look at that brain teaser. Can you figure out what that little clue is? Do you want to tell them, Edwina?
Yeah, that is actually an alarm clock.
Alarm clock, yes. So A-L, arm, alarm, and then C with a lock, alarm clock. So we had to figure this out on the screen and then race and say, who has an alarm clock? Who has an alarm clock? It was so much fun. And again, even though we couldn't all be together, just like you saw that group of people playing Hungry Hippos, and they were sitting there and slamming those hippos, this was actually a similar kind of vibe with people on screen running around, and we're all on camera. So you can see kind of the camera running around through the house. It was a lot of fun. And it was maintaining culture. It felt like Envision. Even though we weren't together, it felt like Envision. So I just mentioned the scavenger hunt. We've had a Jeopardy game. And a lot of what we do is we do try to do teams, which is something we do at the office as well. Whenever we have any of those game days at the office, we do try to, do games that require you to team up with some of your colleagues for that team building type aspect. Mad Libs. I actually wasn't able to join the Mad Libs one. Edwina, tell us about that. How did that go?
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. It ended up being a lot of general conversation, light conversation between people, but we found a really cool website that had thousands upon thousands of Mad Libs where you could just enter in a noun or an adjective. And we just went through the people that had attended. They gave answers, and then I read it back to everyone, and we laughed because, of course, we're throwing in things about Envision, and Todd's name, our CEO, got thrown into a couple of things. So it was just a really fun, lighthearted, easygoing kind of game.
Yeah, and it provided an opportunity for people to connect, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And, the last one, Cake Day. So that's a fun one because that's something that we physically do here in the office. The second Tuesday of every month, we have cake to celebrate all of the birthdays that month and all of the anniversaries. We're not all in the office to enjoy cake. And even, when we are starting to get back together, it's probably going to be a little while before we're sharing, community food on our tiki bar that's in our office. So how do we take something like that our team members, our colleagues here have all come to expect and enjoy, and how do we turn that on its head to make it work in a distributed fashion? So what we did with Cake Day was we told everybody, you know what? Make your own cake, make your own dessert, whatever you want, and let's all get together at 2 o'clock on this day like we would normally in the office. We would gather by the tiki bar and we'd have, cake, and they also provide fruit. So we'd have cake and fruit, and we would, enjoy some conversation. So let's do that in a distributed fashion. The only difference is we're not going to be buying the cake and putting it on a tiki bar. And it became kind of a fun experience because different people were showing off what they had made, and people were like, oh, I wish that I was there. I love brownies. I wish I would have made brownies. Again, an opportunity to get together, an opportunity to connect when we all cannot be together. Set an example and the team will follow. Everything that I've just mentioned are things that Envision has done as a company. But what we're also hearing is the same tools that we use to connect, like Teams, our employees are using those same tools to connect with each other. So just like our employees, we have a number of employees that would get together regularly to play certain board games. We have a couple of them that would get together to go fishing. And certainly we have a lot of them that get together to go out to eat. Those are all things that we're not able to do right now, but we've seen them starting to do that virtually. They have taken that baton that we've started with, and they've started to set up their own sessions so they can get together and they can connect with each other and they can continue that culture. Because the company can start that experience. They can put those opportunities out there to build culture, but you really need, your company culture is driven by your employees. So give them the opportunities, and I really believe that you will find that they will start to take it as well. And again, as I said at the start, not all of these are going to work for you. If you don't do Cake Day, I'm not suggesting you do virtual Cake Day. I'm not suggesting that you do Mad Libs or trivia contests, but maybe those will work. But I think the lesson here is think about the different things that you do in your organization and consider how you can do something similar, how they can be transformed, or how you can do something else instead that would fill that gap and would still provide culture even though everyone's not together. Last point on this, I'll just point out is not everyone's going to want to join in, and that's okay. I had mentioned that we have certain employees that don't usually participate in after-hours type cultural events, and they've started to jump on to some of the happy hours and the morning coffees. There are other members of the organization that participate all the time that have not been able to participate as much, myself included. I know that I have been very, very busy in afternoons. Sometimes, a lot of times when we do this, I'm simply not available. I have 2 children at home that are remote learning. My wife is also working at home. There are the challenges that we're all dealing with. So sometimes I am unable to join on some of our fun events. That's okay. You're going to have people that can join. You're going to have people that can't join. No one should be penalized for not being able to join. But I will say this, if you notice that there are people that are never participating, especially if they're people that genuinely are big cultural advocates and suddenly they've gone largely silent when it comes to some of the cultural type events that you're putting together, that is something you might want to ask about. That is something you might want to look at. And it's a great segue into our next topic, our next point, which is ensuring that people feel safe. And Edwina has actually done a ton on that front for Envision. So I'm going to turn it over to her and have her talk a little bit about this topic.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, so, we put it into 3 overarching categories. Physical safety, obviously right now, everything going on with COVID, this is on the forefront of everyone's mind. Some things that we've been doing are minimizing the number of people allowed in our office space. And we've also started focusing on reorganizing our office space from people's desk locations, like physically moving their desks into different parts of the office so that we can keep 6 to 8 feet of different distance between one another. We've created a flow for walking so that we can minimize people crossing paths. We've even separated our employees into 2 groups, blue and green, and we're going to be designating days of the week that each group can be in the office, again, with minimized numbers. We're adjusting a lot of our communal items, things like moving our beloved popcorn maker into storage for right now, and adding in mini fridges throughout the office so that people don't have to walk through the entire office just to get a drink of water. We've put all of this into a plan and have been communicating it to our team and also just reminding them that, things are subject to change. We may improve upon that in some way down the line, but right now, this is what we're starting with. We've obviously put masks and gloves available for inter-office use, as well as surface sanitizer and hand sanitizer. one thing that we're doing with this is opening it up for people that are having a difficult time finding these things, so that they can take it home and use it in their regular everyday lives, even when they're not in the office. You know, the last thing that we want is for an employee to feel at risk when they're pumping gas because they can't find gloves in a store. Some of the other physical things that we have for ensuring physical safety are telehealth services. Right now, there is a huge push from healthcare companies to incorporate telehealth into employer plans. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Envision has actually been using a third-party company to do this for, I want to say it's been about 3 or 4 years now. We use 1-800-MD, and this allows all of our employees access to medical professionals without having to physically go into a doctor's office, an emergency room, or even a walk-in. For us, the perk to using a third-party company is that we can offer it to everybody, even if they have health insurance through different means, you know, a spouse company, something like that. They're still eligible for this. We also offer this to our employees to purchase a subscription for their family members. So my parents, I do usually purchase it for my parents so that they can use it for their households. In light of COVID, we've actually opened that up again so that starting from April through the end of the year, people can still purchase a subscription for families that maybe weren't thinking about it as being a real need at the end of 2019. Ensuring mental health and safety. Employee assistance programs are a great tool. Envision has been using them since well before I began. Generally, they're 24/7, 365 services that, 365 days a year, services that employees can use to deal with whatever life is throwing at them. They're at no cost to employees and they're completely confidential. So they offer support with everything from helping individuals find elder care services for, you know, aging parents to family members or individuals that are struggling with addiction. Envision uses Coastline EAP. They're a local company to us, and we found that their regular services have been amazing. Since the start of COVID has began, they have actually increased their services to incorporate that, tips and tricks on staying healthy, staying safe, and they've even started offering a virtual meditation and mindfulness seminars, which has been really great. The other thing that I have in here is under mental safety is job performance and security. Having a system in place that kind of hits back to what Jeremy was saying about communication. A few years ago, we reworked our performance evaluation system and decided to go with a cloud platform that employees and managers can use to identify and track long-term and short-term professional goals. Having this tool that our employees can log into and see how they've been progressing towards meeting their goals, and especially right now, identifying ways that their goals are shifting, can be a huge weight off someone's mind. A lot of people feel that, you know, things have changed so quickly that they're having a tough time dealing with it, and having a cloud-based system like that and reviewing that with their managers has been wonderful. And then we come to financial. And this to me is two parts, which part one kind of overlapping from ensuring mental health and safety. And the first part is keeping our employees up to date on how the company is doing. This is something that Envision has, again, been doing for years. We used to do them quarterly, but since COVID, I think we've increased to about monthly. And it involves whole team meetings, going over things like financials, new business, discussing if we're hitting our projections. Right now, this is so important because there's a flood of information out there, and it allows our whole team the ability to hear from Todd, our CEO, about how the company is doing. The second part is based more on focusing on our employees' financial wellness and providing education and support wherever we can with that. Prior to COVID, we offered a financial wellness program, and it involved everything from our controller offering group classes on personal finance to bringing in industry professionals from different banking institutions and financial consulting groups, and just to review topics from basic budgeting, consolidating debt, through how to refinance your home, and really everything in between. So we've had to adjust some of that recently through webinars and go over broader subjects, but it also enables our team to schedule one-on-one meetings and gives them the opportunity to discuss their personal accounts or questions with these professionals. And really just reminding our employees to take the time to review these things. So, and then,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think, you know, to just piggyback on some of the stuff you're saying, all of those services that you've mentioned, I mean, as an employee, I've personally taken advantage of them. Certainly the telemedicine, especially right now, being able to, you know, call and speak to someone over the phone about something that has nothing to do with COVID, about, hey, I get this little, you know, bit of eczema and I use the same kind of topical cream. Can you call that in for me? Not having to put myself or my family at risk for something as simple as that. That's incredibly important. And I think, you know, you and I talk about this all the time. And, you know, I want to point this out is, you know, I've spoken a lot about fun aspects of Envision, about, you know, having cake and playing games and, you know, coffee time and happy hour. But an important part of culture and everything that you're talking about here is making sure that our team members know that we are here for them, for their, as you pointed out, their, you know, their physical, their mental, and their financial well-being, that we are here to support them. And there are resources that we have in place. And I know, you know, Edwina, you can talk a little bit every time we have any kind of, you know, staff meeting or any time that we get together in a business fashion, you make it a point to reinforce what those resources are so the team knows what they have available to them, right?
Yeah, I feel a little bit like a broken record sometimes, but it's usually when we're, you know, experiencing something that is so overwhelming. And right now we're all going through COVID, but we all have our own personal lives that are still going on. And we forget that we have these resources. So it's really important to kind of drill it into people.
Yeah, and especially now when people, they think that because they're not in the office, maybe they don't have access to these resources. And, you know, that's what I would suggest to those who have joined us today is when you have a distributed workforce, people need to understand that these company resources are available to them while they are part of the company, even if they're not coming into the office, even if they are completely a distributed worker that you have hired from across the country. I said earlier that having a distributed workforce gives you, it opens up a larger potential workforce pool to you if you have team members that are not in the office and they're never going to be in the office with any regularity. Ensuring that they know that all of these resources are available to them, I think that is absolutely critical to their safety and to company culture, how they perceive the company, how they feel about it. That's important.
Definitely.
Yeah, and that last point there, you know, ask people how they're doing. Again, super, super simple, but I can't tell you how many times I've gotten on with a colleague and they look a little different. They look a little down. I mean, I've done it too. I've had, you know, Todd and my other, you know, other team members say to me, hey, how you doing today? You're looking a little, you know, looking a little down. And, you know, sometimes that's just what we need. So that's part of culture as well. That's part of ensuring people feel safe, letting them know that these resources are available and that we care about them. Cool. Well, I'm going to go on to the next point. We just got two more. We're going to wrap this up. Establish standards and communicate. So Edwina actually touched on this a bit when she talked about our team meetings, how, you know, we used to do them quarterly, but we've ramped up that regularity during COVID-19, so our team members know what is happening, you know, financially at Envision, what we're working on. But also one of the things we talk a lot about is what we're doing here at Envision to make sure people feel safe, to make sure that our marketing is responding to the changing conditions, to make sure that we all have a place to continue working. we often say when we talk about cybersecurity, which is a topic we've spoken about at length for a number of years, Todd has regularly used the phrase, it is a culture of shared responsibility. That when it comes to security, your company's only secure as your weakest link. So everyone as a team needs to work together to make sure that everyone knows what the security standards are, how they can protect each other. It is the exact same thing now that we are dealing with this pandemic. Everyone needs to know that this is a culture of shared responsibility to keep people safe, and it's a culture of shared responsibility to maintain culture. We all have a role in this. But part of what you want to do is you want to make sure that everyone understands what is expected. So Edwina touched upon some of the changes that we're making here in our office, and we just had a team meeting about this last week where we let everyone know what we were thinking, what changes we are instituting. So as our organization, as our office starts to slowly reopen to allow for more team members to come in with a little bit more regularity. Again, we're not going back to everyone in the office 5 days a week, but as we are going to start to, ease some of the restrictions that we put in place, just like, the state of Rhode Island and others are easing some of those restrictions. We want everyone to know what our standards are, what is expected of them. Updates are important, and video updates are critical. So you can see that video there. That is actually a video of Todd that every single week, if we don't have a team meeting all together, if we do have a team meeting all together, he's on video and he records that team meeting. So anybody who couldn't join us live can still watch the replay and get that information. But even on weeks when we don't have a team meeting like that, Todd records this little video on Fridays, just updating everybody what's going on, not only in the business, but what he's reading in the news, what he's hearing at the state level, what's going to be happening. Everyone needs to be informed. Being able to do that through recorded video is actually a great way because it allows team members to get that update, to watch that video when they actually have time to do so. So when you're communicating, the other thing I want you to remember is that communication goes both ways. Ask the team for feedback and listen to what is suggested. Some of the things that we are doing here as we start to reopen the office and some of the things that we're thinking about for company culture in terms of different events that we're going to do, both now while we're fully distributed and as we kind of shift a little bit, these are based on feedback from our team members. That is incredibly important. So keep those lines of communication open, leverage video as much as you possibly can to really build that connection there. And the last thing I'll offer is just be flexible. If you want to maintain company culture, you've got to be ready to adapt. And that takes a couple different forms, I would suggest. I mean, right now, with people working from home, we need to kind of be flexible because we're all dealing with a really weird circumstance. How many videos have you been on where a child or a pet runs into the screen or starts yelling in the background? And it's interesting because I've been on quite a few like that, and no one bats an eyelash anymore because we're all dealing with this kind of shared experience where we've seen it, we've probably had it happen to us. I mean, the first time, it's funny, I mentioned that. So I don't have little kids, but I actually have a couple teenagers. And the other day I was on a call with a partner and I actually secluded myself in the basement. And all of a sudden the house just starts rumbling and I'm like, what is going on? And it was my daughter making a smoothie, like really right above me. And, you're kind of waiting for it to stop, and I'm just waiting and waiting and waiting. This was the most not efficiently, I should say, this was the most well-blended smoothie ever because it sounded like she had rocks in that thing. She was grinding it for so long. No one that I was talking to bat an eyelash because they've all had it happen to them. And I know that when I'm on a webinar and something crazy like that happens, I'm not going to think anything of it either. That is part of being flexible, is understanding that we are all dealing with this. There are going to be times where you want to schedule something at 12 o'clock and you may have a team member that says, listen, that is actually the time where my kids, that they little window where they have to eat lunch, and that's the one period where I can do it with them. That's part of being flexible. That's part of company culture, I think, is understanding that we are all dealing with these unique needs. And it's easy to say, we need to be flexible, but the reality is, when we're all in the office and we're all dealing with a shared experience in the office, it's easy to have certain expectations and kind of paint expectations with one brush. Now that we're all distributed, we're rethinking that a little bit because everyone has all of these unique needs. But we got to remember that as offices start reopening, because as offices start reopening and you have certain team members that come in and are working as part of the, the reality that we knew for so many years, the traditional office environment, when you do still have team members that are outside of the office, we have to remember that we can't go back to painting all circumstances with the same brush, that we have to be cognizant of everyone's unique individual situations and be flexible to try to accommodate them and what they're dealing with as much as possible. That is going to be a big part of maintaining company culture and ensuring that those team members that are distributed, again, I don't like to use the word remote, but we don't want them to feel remote. Okay, by being flexible, it allows them to not feel like they're on an island and we don't understand where they're coming from. So with that, that's, kind of what we have today. Thank you very much. We actually don't have any webinars on our schedule right now. We've done a flurry of them over the last few weeks, and we kind of took a bit of a breather. We're coming back. We're thinking of a number of new topics. We've done webinars in the last few weeks on marketing, on HR, on hiring, obviously this one on company culture. So we are talking to a number of you. We are talking to a number of our, not only colleagues here, a number of our clients, just to find out what topics are of interest to you. And we're planning a whole new slate of remote events, including some very, very exciting ones that I think are going to be unlike anything that people have ever seen before. We are planning all of these and they will be coming soon, but all Envision events you can find on our website at envisionsuccess.net/events. And once again, there's some contact information. Thank you all very much for joining us today. It's 2:52 right now. I'll get you all out a few minutes early unless there's any questions. And I'm going to look right now. We've got no questions, so I'll hang out for a few minutes. If anyone does have any questions, Edwina and I are happy to answer it. But if not, again, thank you for joining us. We'll talk to you all soon.